What's up, everybody? Good morning. Well, I'm out here on this beautiful sunny day, my morning cup of coffee, and it's a little bit cold. I wanted to do a video about distrust, and this stems from my morning inspirations, which usually bring forth some form of idea that I want to talk about. And for example, in my feed this morning, there was a video by Gabriel, which was entitled "Vaccines, Do They Cause Autism?" Or something like that. And I said, you opened up a can of worms on this one, because I think I made one or two videos about a year ago about vaccines. And a few years back, when my second son was born, I have three kids. One's out of high school, and one's 5 and one's 2. And I had to make a decision whether or not to vaccinate my children. And as we all know, these days you can opt out of vaccines. You can still send your kid to school. They have different rules for kids that are not vaccinated. For example, if there's an outbreak in the area, kids aren't allowed to go to school if they're not vaccinated, which I think is legitimate, and I think that that's a good thing to have, because the dispute here is not whether or not vaccines work. We know they work. The argument is whether or not the government or some agency or the elite or someone is trying to kill us off through these vaccines. Now, there's two lines of thinking on this. One is that they are actually trying to poison us through the vaccines, and another line of thinking is that they are unintentionally harming people by using things in the vaccines, such as thimerosal, which is mercury. From the research I've done, I've found that they're not using mercury in children's vaccines anymore. They may be using small amounts for certain vaccines, I'm not sure. But what it comes down to is not whether or not there's a possibility that something could cause something. Is there evidence to show that it does conclusively? And when right before my middle son went to school, I had to make a decision. I researched incessantly, trying to find any information I could on this autism vaccine connection, because I was nervous. And I came to find out that most of the whole craziness about it all came forth when Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy spoke out about autism and vaccines. And they convinced everybody it was true through this research that was done by this one doctor. And this one doctor, it turned out, had been paid off. He had been funded trying to find a flaw in vaccines. And this has happened many times. I'm not sitting here saying vaccines are safe or not safe. And I'm not sitting here stating that there aren't dangers to vaccines. But I'd like to compare it for a minute to like peanut butter. Because even though that analogy may not seem to fit, it's a legitimate one. We don't ban peanut butter because people have peanut allergies. A few people may have allergies to vaccines. Some people may be very more prone to the disease itself, for example. Now, let's say a person has a major reaction to the vaccine. This could be nothing compared to the danger that they would face if they actually caught mumps or measles. Now, people in my generation don't have a clue as to what an outbreak is like. We like to think that we do. We like to think that, we can deal with our diseases, that nature will provide the diseases, and we can deal with them on our own. We are dealing with them on our own by creating vaccines. Now, this is what humans have done in order to try to prevent disease. And when I was thinking about it earlier, I thought, I've heard some arguments coming from the extreme Christian right and against vaccines. And I realized that this is because many people believe that, everything's in God's hands, and it's not our place to step up and try to change things. In other words, pestilence and disease was a way for God to kill off the wicked, and that if God chooses to give you mumps, then so be it. This goes along with the same, the parents who don't take their children to the doctor because they don't believe in modern medicine. I heard somebody make a statement once to say, do you believe that God performs miracles? And they say, yeah. And they said, do you believe if you pray hard enough for a cure for your son, then the God will save them? They said, yeah. They said, well, is there a possibility then that God could have answered your prayers in the form of a vaccine? In other words, God works through people, right? This isn't about God. This isn't about religion. This is about, health and the distrust we have with our government. The reason why I find this so important is because so many people are not vaccinating their children based on flawed information. And what I'll find is often when there's a discussion about vaccines, if you go down the list of comments, by the time you get to the end, they're talking about chemtrails and government conspiracies and other things where they've tested on the public and killed people off. All of this is true. The American government has been testing on people, their own people, and they still are. All types of diseases and medicines. They released a flu from the CDC not too long ago in Arizona, I believe. A bunch of people got sick and died. These things do happen, so it causes this line of distrust, and so we assume that all medicine is somehow dangerous. The pharma industry is polluted. It's a horrible mess of garbage. I made a video a while back about antidepressants and how they will, destroy your brain, and I had a lot of people retorting against that, saying, how dare you speak against antidepressants? They help a lot of people. And I say, exactly. They do help a lot of people, but they're prescribed more in cases where they're not needed. Vaccines, on the other hand, we seem to think that they're prescribed when they're not needed. I hear a lot of parents say, hey, we haven't had a case of the mumps or the measles in decades. Why would we even vaccinate against this? That is the worst line of thinking and the most uneducated line of thought that I've ever heard. To say just because the disease isn't here, we shouldn't vaccinate. The reason the disease isn't here is because we vaccinate. And, my children are healthy and they both have their vaccines, and, I had to take that risk. But it's like somebody said, because I'll tell you, 5 years ago, I was opposed to vaccines. I was out there fighting and saying that they're dangerous. Until I did a little bit more work and research on it to find that I was just buying into what other people were telling me. Somebody would say, so-and-so said that there's this doctor that claimed this, and there was this whistleblower on this, and I'll say, well, who was it and what was it? And you just never hear back about it. And it might be one random scientist in some country. If this was really as big of an issue as people are making it to be, there would be a lot more people speaking out on this. People who are involved in the industry itself, and maybe there are a few. But overall, we have to look at the whole of the picture, which is that vaccines are preventing disease and death. Polio. Polio? You ever met anybody with polio? Of course not. That was so common back in the day. And when I was really opposed to vaccines, I did my research and I started to understand that they have a place, and much of the medicine we have has a place. Much of the medicine that we have in our markets that we've created through the pharma industry has a place and is beneficial, whereas a lot of it is just out to make money and sell. And money is the driving factor behind business, and that's just the world we live in. But if you kill off all the people, there's nobody left to buy your product. So anyway, I'm not here supporting any particular industry. I'm just saying that the point somebody made to me years ago was I said, I don't want to get my kids vaccinated because I don't want them to get sick or get autism. And somebody said, if your children grow up and they decide they want to travel the world, what if they look at you and say, why didn't you vaccinate me against this or that? It's and of course you can get a vaccination later, but there's not much else I can say. You just look at the big picture. Look at how much disease we used to have, and look at how much we have now. Look at the preventable diseases in other countries that in America we don't have to deal with. We don't have malaria outbreaks here. We don't have the same types of, problems that they have in other countries because of the fact that Americans are so spoiled in our comfort zone that we have forgotten how bad it could really be. So recently there have been a few outbreaks in some schools, and these have been in areas where kids are unvaccinated. One of them, I believe, was in Ashland, Oregon, and there are a lot of alternative type parents who get together and believe that not vaccinating their children is the best bet to keep them healthy. and that's purely misinformed. So this is just the subjective view of one person who's done the research as best I can. Not trying to start an argument or debate here. It's an open forum to say, hey, if somebody has any particular new evidence to provide that autism is caused by vaccines, or that they're more dangerous than they are beneficial, I'd be glad to look at it. And I think that we have to break it down to that root, which is there more benefit than risk? If one kid in a million gets autism compared to, 1 in 100 dying of mumps or measles, what's the benefit? What's the risk? And so using my rational thinking to the best of my ability, I would say that vaccines are a very useful thing, although we're trying to work out, we're still young, okay? We're still young and learning how to use these things. It's not like they've been around forever, We've got 50 years of vaccines and we're saying, woo, look, we can prevent all these diseases, and we made a few mistakes along the way, like using mercury as a preservative. But we have to move forward. Conquering disease is part of being a human, and the genetics of humans will eventually develop to where you can fight disease in the area you live in. For example, people who live in Africa are more prone to get, just like when the whites came to America and all the new world died. How did all the Aztecs, the Mayans, all those die off when the white people came? It was from disease, because they weren't immune to our diseases. And just like we're not immune to some of their diseases, but now that the world is open and we travel, our genetics can no longer protect us against the environment, because people are bringing all types of illnesses all around from other countries. So we can't rely on our genetics to prevent disease anymore. We look to medicine. So all I want is the truth, and I don't want to argue against or for vaccines. I just want to say this is how I feel about it, and I felt both ways, so I understand both sides of the coin. So with that, I bid you adieu, and safe travels, people.